Hey guys, thanks for joining me. You might want to get some tea or some coffee. What I'm going to do in this particular video is expand a little bit on another video that ex-JW Elder's wife Jane Doe had previously done, coming from the June 1st, 2006 Watchtower study article entitled Jehovah Tells from the Beginning, the Finale. And perceivably, this article is based on Isaiah 46:10 that reads, "The one telling from the beginning the finale, and from long ago the things that have not been done." Now, all Christians will recognize that this God in the Bible, Jehovah, is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-wise. However you want to contextualize that God, He's always put it in the most favorable position in your psyche. But there was two paragraphs that she referred to in this article that one word in both these paragraphs caused my mind to go in a place that it probably should not have gone. And yes, once again, it's just this simple. When you really pay attention to the words that, your religious nut jobs are using against you. Now, before I go any further, what I would like for you friends to do, I'm going to put a link down below to a video from the Inspired channel, and it is entitled, let me get it here, I do have a few notes. It's entitled, "Only Certain People Can See It." And the overall thought process of that particular video has to do with what's going on in the world this very day. But at the same time, when we really look at the control mechanism that Watchtower has used, it's really not that different than what the world is trying to do right now. And it really has to do with destroying your self-respect. But before I get into that any further, I want to go back and read those two paragraphs that Jane Doe had read, and then I'm going to come back and focus on that one particular word. So again, this is the June 1st, 2006 Watchtower study article, and I'm going to read paragraphs 16 and 17. When Jehovah chose to lay a command upon Adam not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, He provided adequate instruction so that Adam could decide what to do. He allowed Adam to eat from every tree of the garden except one, and warned of the fatal results of eating the fruit of the forbidden tree. He laid before Adam the consequences of his actions. What would Adam do? Jehovah apparently, there's one of those deflective words that Watchtower so frequently uses. Basically, they don't know. They don't have the details. Excuse me. So starting over. Jehovah apparently chose not to foresee what Adam and Eve would do, even though He has the ability to know everything in advance. It is therefore a question not of whether Jehovah can foresee the future, but of whether He chooses to do so. Furthermore, we can reason that Jehovah, being a God of love, would not knowingly and cruelly predetermine that rebellion with all its sad consequences should take place. Thus, as far as Jehovah's exercise of foreknowledge is concerned, it is selective. It is selective. Yeah, I got it. But the word that I want to focus on is the word found in verse 16. He provided adequate instructions. And it's that word adequate that I want to expand upon a little bit. Now I have Black's Law Dictionary, and it's a pretty interesting dictionary. But what I want to do is I want to read a definition of the phrase adequate notice, because obviously as it pertains to the Garden of Eden and the tree of knowledge of good and bad, Watchtower sells this notion as that, well, you know, Adam was given adequate notice what would happen. So I want to read the definition here of adequate notice. Notice reasonably calculated to apprise a person of an action, proceeding, or motion. Notice sufficient to permit an objection or defense. Pretty self-explanatory. I want to go up and read the one above it. Adequate consideration. One which is equal or reasonably proportioned to the value of that for which it is given. One which is not so disproportionate as to shock our senses of that morality and fair dealing which should always characterize transactions between man and man. Well, I'm going to just replace that portion of the sentence, between man and God. See? Adequate consideration, one which is equal or reasonably proportioned. So when Watchtower chose to use this word here, that he provided adequate instruction, well, that could be true from a certain point of view, but did Jehovah really describe what the adequate consequences were going to be? No. You don't read the true sense of the consequences until after they each pass the blame. Adam to Eve, Eve to the serpent. But the problem with the word adequate, it can be used in a multiple of sentence structures. It can be used to justify, as Watchtower is using it here. It can be used as a deflection, which is being used here, and I'll explain. And more accurately, this word is being used so that it deflects from any accountability on Jehovah's part, because he adequately instructed Adam. And that's what we see happen here in the Garden of Eden. So what I want to do is pull out the Bible just a little bit, and I want to disseminate what I see going on in the Bible, and how Adam was not adequately informed. Now we know how all of this goes. Okay, so I want to go to Genesis chapter 3 and start at verse 16, because I have a series of questions as it relates to the word adequately. To the woman, he said, I shall greatly increase the pains of your pregnancy. In birth pains you will bring forth children, and your craving will be for your husband, and he will dominate you. Did Jehovah adequately describe to Adam what a curse was? How could Eve even begin to understand and comprehend adequately what birth pains was even like? Because she hadn't birthed anybody at this point. So Jehovah uses a curse to increase her pains when she doesn't even know what birth pains is? That's inadequacy. That's ineptness on the part of this God. See, that's not adequate. Because if Eve has not borne any children at this point, she doesn't even know the difference between mildly delivering a child or in huge pain delivering a child. How could she even comprehend what craving your husband would be like? She hasn't had the opportunity to crave anything up until this point, right? Now let's go on to the man. Verse 17, and to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife's voice and took to eating from the tree concerning which I gave you this command, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground on your account. In pain you will eat its produce all the days of your life. And thorns and thistles it will grow for you, and you must eat the vegetation of the field. In the sweat of your face you will eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you shall return. When Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden, there is nothing that indicates that there was another food source on this earth. Even in those scriptures I just read, there's no thought process leaning to eating wild animals as food. It's the vegetation. The ground will produce vegetation. There's nothing in this scripture that even alludes to that Jehovah allowed Adam and Eve to go back into the garden to get the food necessary for the seed to grow, to even eat the food while their seed's growing. Because let's just face it, you plant a cucumber seed, the cucumber plant doesn't produce food overnight, does it? No! So this, again, is ineptness on the part of this God to put these curses on these people without even identifying any length of time, because like I said, you don't plant a seed and it produces food overnight. We all know that Jehovah restricted Adam and Eve going back to the garden to grab enough food because he planted the two angels. So when Watchtower uses a word like adequate instruction, it's very deceptive. It's a very deceptive turn to move accountability from Adam and Eve, or excuse me, from God to Adam and Eve. Because I couldn't help but think of this scripture in Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 2, and it's verse 14. Now, I know Paul didn't write this. A lot of your biblical scholars will acknowledge that Paul didn't write this, but yet Christians believe Paul wrote this. So 1 Timothy 2, verse 14. Also, Adam was not deceived, but the woman was thoroughly deceived and came to be in transgression. How could Jehovah God put a curse on the woman when she was thoroughly deceived? And I know, the apologists are going to start typing like they always do. Oh, but they were perfect. They were this and they were that. No, that's not the issue. The issue is that Watchtower implies that Jehovah God adequately taught Adam and Eve. But I beg to differ, because Eve never had a child. So she has nothing to compare with birthing a child without pain, presumably, or a child with increased birth pain. See, this whole thing goes beyond just growing old and dying. It has to do with a curse. And this God that you think is a God of love did nothing to help mankind. Didn't even allow Adam and Eve to go back and get enough food to sustain themselves while they were planting and toiling in the sweat. Jehovah God didn't even prepare them for what it would be like to have one of your children murdered by another one of your children. God didn't prepare them for that. But yet you read in the Bible, oh, look, Eve proclaims, I have produced a male child with the help of Jehovah. The same God that cursed you with the increasing of birth pains because you were deceived. People, wake up. These religious nut jobs, they're not on your side. They're using your emotions and your lack of time to research the Bible. And they do this so that they can steal your money, they can steal your sovereignty, and they will steal your self-respect. Because if you guys did not recognize what I just did in reading these two opposing scriptures, is I made you hold two opposing opinions in your mind. And that's how people can steal your self-respect and your sovereignty. All they got to do is divide you from your heart and your mind. It reminds me of a scripture when Jesus was on the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus said, chapter 6, I believe it is, verse 14, "No one can slave for two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will stick to the one and despise the other. You cannot slave for God and for riches." I'm going to take that scripture to a little higher level. Because we all know that the Watchtower Society will develop the thought process that you can't join the military, you can't become a politician, because, you know, Jesus said, "Be no part of the world as I am no part of the world." And yet at the same time, they refuse to put in your psyche the fact that the Apostle Paul joined the two entities together. He joined religion and politics together. Romans 13. There is no authority except by God. Now you're made to hold two opposing opinions. Can I join the military? Well, no, because, but wait a minute. Paul says there is no authority. So if the government says you are compelled to do the service, but Watchtower says no, you can't because now you're part of the world, you're holding two opposing opinions. But the division truly doesn't come from the aspect of religion and government. It comes from dividing your heart and your mind. They're dividing you. So I take a look at that scripture and I go much, much, much more deeper. You cannot serve a slave for your heart and for your mind. Because when you are complete in heart and mind and heart, they cannot control you. You have reclaimed your sovereignty and your self-respect. And the thing is, friends, is that this making you lose your self-respect really comes from a subtle use of the Bible. For instance, we all know as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, the most unnatural thing Watchtower got us to do was to go from door to door and preach the Bible, right? We all will acknowledge that was an unnatural thing to do. Bother people on a Saturday morning, especially when they might be out mowing the lawn or working on a car or whatever mundane things people would come to do on a Saturday morning. But yet Watchtower uses the Bible to get you to lose your self-respect by throwing in the scripture that says, well, you know, if you don't go preach from door to door, Jehovah's going to ask their blood back at your hand, back from you. So they make you lose self-respect to the point to where you'll go and, you know, do anything they say. It's unbelievable, friends, how simple and clear this is for me to see. It really is. Because I recognize the absolute control mechanism. Okay? They get you to lose your self-respect. Even to the point to where you become not empathetic, but where you lose empathy for people. See, if you don't go preach, Jehovah's gonna, you know, ask that blood back at your hand. So you go knock at the door, you try to give, you know, your little spiel from the Bible, and they, you know, shout you off the porch. You go back into the car and say, "Whew, I can't wait for Armageddon. I can't wait for Jehovah to destroy this wicked person. And I'm going to walk into their house. This piece of property belongs to me right after Armageddon. They destroy fellow feeling. But recognize once again, it's this book and the God that's attached to this book. So let me show you, by way of example, how holding two opinions, opposing opinion, will affect you psychologically. And this really pertains to Jehovah's Witnesses, because I believe Watchtower has mastered the technique of getting you to hold two opposing opinions. That last meal that I had with my mother, she asked me to say prayer, and at that point I said I would, but you have to understand I won't use the name Jehovah, because I discovered it was a Catholic invented name by Raymundus Martini, but I will use the name Yahweh, and immediately shut her down. Why? Because that's two opposing opinions. Even though Watchtower will tell you that, well, you know, the Israelite name or the Hebrew name for Jehovah is Yahweh, they refuse to accept that, because it's really two opposing opinions. It was God's name Yahweh, or is it Jehovah? Is it Jehovah? Is it Jesus to the Trinitarians? Is it... You see how they hold two opposing opinions. Did your God Jehovah adequately teach you that through your faithful and discreet nut jobs? No, otherwise my mother would not have reacted the way she did. I have another instance just recently related to me from a friend back east. Now this friend is not a Jehovah's Witness, but their mate is. And what happened is that they went to a family wedding, and this non-Jehovah Witness person offered a prayer. And they offered the prayer, "Oh Jehovah," however they went. But the thing is they used the name Jehovah. And after everything was done, on their way home, my friend asked his mate, "How did you feel about that minister praying to Jehovah?" Immediately shut their mate down. Shut them right down. Because now they're holding two opposing opinions. See, the thing is Jehovah's Witnesses, if you will allow me, have thoroughly instructed this world through the use of the King James, Psalms 83:18, that men may know that you, whose name is Jehovah, the Most High over all the earth. So for decades, we have gone from door to door, impressing upon people's mind in your own version of the Bible that God's name is Jehovah. But here's the problem. In the Watchtower nonsense, they'll also implant, well, only those calling on the name of Jehovah will get away safe. But the problem is it's only contextualized in relationship to the Watchtower society. They don't adequately explain that to their followers. So while you're going from door to door teaching people, that God's name is Jehovah, they shut down mentally when they hear somebody other than a Jehovah Witness use the name Jehovah, particularly in a prayer, because in that prayer, that person is calling on the name of Jehovah. So psychologically, they can't deal with that, because they're holding two opposing opinions. So this is how some will try to get you to hold two opposing opinions. Okay? Now, when Kim and I were first waking up, we've done exactly what everyone else does. You go back, and you read the Gospels at least, and you find Jesus. You even come to realize that Jesus says, if you believe in me, you will not be judged. Okay? But the problem is this, is that so many Christians will destroy the New World Translation. It's a corrupted Bible. Watchtower tampered with it here. I do it myself because I can actually see it. But here's the problem. you'll have those that hold strictly to the King James Version. And they'll say, Mikey, when you wake up these Jehovah's Witnesses, make sure you get them into the King James Version to find the real Jesus. And my reply is, and was at that time, what? Are you saying I didn't find the real Jesus because I found him in the New World Translation? That's holding two opposing opinions, because you cannot sit and destroy the value, if you will, the New World Translation and encapsulate it in finding the real Jesus. You can't do that because you're holding two opposing opinions. So they'll come back and say, well, no, that's not what I really meant. Then what did you really mean? Because the New World Translation and the King James Version both say, coming out of Jesus' mouth, if you believe in me, you won't be judged. So even those in Christendom tried to manipulate your mind to hold two opposing opinions. Now, for my third point, and I'm going to make this clear, but it's going to be painful, but you're going to see the humor in it. We all know that the Watchtower Bible Tract Society on multiple occasions through their publications has made this statement. The generation of 1914 will not pass away until all these things occur, including the start of the Great Tribulation. So with great anticipation, Jehovah's Witnesses are looking for a better way of life, a new system of things that's tied to the passing away of that generation, or more specifically stated, the not passing away of that generation until all these things occur. Here comes the two opposing opinions, because we all watched what David Splain did with that little chart about the overlapping generation. Do you Jehovah's Witnesses see that they created two opposing opinions in your mind? But there's something else that David Splain did with that little chart. He tried to put the shit back into the horse. You see? Because the prophecy failed. They have no other choice than to try to recreate something in your mind, but what they're really doing is putting an opposing opinion. Splain literally tried to put the shit back in the horse. That's why so many witnesses woke up. That's why so many left. And that's why your organization, Watchtower, is full of PMOs. Once that horse is crapped, or the bull is crapped, you can't put it back in, because you're creating those two opposing opinions. That's why you will lose. That's why I can pick out a word in a Watchtower magazine like adequate and literally destroy your theology. Jehovah's Witnesses, did Watchtower, aka Jehovah, through the governing body, adequately tell you what the consequences were going to be if you discover in one of their magazines, one of their articles, that the name Jehovah was invented by Raymondus Martini? No, they didn't, because they never thought this through. Did Watchtower adequately give you the information you needed when you're going through the organization book, asking, going over those baptismal questions? Did they adequately tell you what the consequences were going to be? That you're going to live a curse now because you can't talk to your family members? Even specifically if you get disfellowshipped and labeled an apostate? Did they adequately tell you that everything coming out of the mouth of an apostate is actually found in their articles? No, they didn't. Because they're mimicking the God in the Old Testament that really proves himself to be inadequate. Jane Doe did another, I don't know if it was the same video or another video, she actually really showed an absolute contradiction. She read the scripture in Joshua where Jehovah tells Joshua to hamstring the horses. And if you don't know what hamstringing is, it's a very cruel measure to do to any animal. But yet then she contrasts that with the scripture, presumably written by Solomon. You know, the book of Proverbs was written by Solomon. And when Solomon writes in that particular scripture she used, the demand from Jehovah is not to be cruel to your animals. There's that opposing opinions you're forced to hold in your head, because you can't, as a Jehovah's Witness, speak out against these opposing opinions. You read the Bible, you'll see that even David hamstrung the horses. Now, I think that's a very stupid and foolish thing to do, and to be honest with you, it mimics what the government's doing now. See, back in those days, the horse was a very valuable commodity to any society, any tribe of people. So when Joshua allegedly captured all these horses, he took away the benefit to his community of having a large amount of horses. He took away the ability of using the horse as a plow. He took away the ability of being able to put a carriage or a cart on the back of that horse, so that as they went to their yearly festivals, instead of carrying these items on your back or on one horse, because you have to remember, Jehovah's Witnesses, we all watched that little thing, that little video Watchtower did about, you know, begging for more money. You know, see the Apostle Paul taking up a collection for the brothers in Jerusalem, you know, but don't give out of your necessities, you know, give from your surplus. So you have this dumbass painting a picture of this family sitting down. Well, you know, we've been saving money for an extra donkey. Well, let's forgo buying the donkey and let's give the money to Paul so we can give to the brothers in Jerusalem. After all, that's our excess. That's our surplus. What a piss poor use of an illustration, because back then, the more donkeys you had, the easier it was for you to commute. Okay? If you have a family that needs to go 20 miles away to the next city to, you know, for whatever reason, buy a produce, buy some stone to carve a cup, whatever, it's easier to travel when you have more donkeys. You just don't get in a car and drive 20 minutes to wherever you're going and put all your stuff in the trunk of a car. I hope you guys are realizing that exactly what Watchtower's doing. They're making you hold two opposing thoughts, two opposing opinions. You can't serve your heart, Sergey, because your mind tells you, well, if I don't go from door to door, Jehovah's going to kill me. You see how they divide your psyche? These guys are masters at it, friends. They're absolute masters. So for Jehovah to instruct Joshua to hamstring those horses, Jehovah is literally destroying a valuable commodity as people lived back then. Once again, guys, these religious nut jobs, they do not have your best interest in heart. And that's why I love YouTube so much, because now you can go and type in, let's see, let me come up with something here real quick. Type in the search engine, what is hidden in proposition not, yada yada yada. How many people voted in favor of giving money to the news media that's screwing with our brains today? It's the same mechanism. It's the same mechanism. They are destroying valuable commodities and they're giving it to someone else, and or they're keeping it all for themselves. It's not that difficult, friends. All you need to do is wake up and comprehend, especially from a religious perspective. Comprehend how this mechanism is used to make you serve two masters. You can't serve yourself and serve Jehovah. If you serve yourself only, then you are selfish. Well, look, Sergey, don't worry about learning to play the violin in the conservatory now. You have all of eternity. I mean, after all, that horse shit. And Splain's trying to put it back in. Have a great day, guys.